Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us with the Free State Centre webinar, Understanding Smart Cities. I hand you over to our host, who is Mr. Joesph George, the chairman of the Free State Centre.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Free State Centre's November webinar. Just a few considerations that we're asking everyone. Attendees are reminded to ensure volume is turned up on the device so that they can hear properly. Ensure that you have a stable internet connection. This will ensure streaming and the audio will run smoothly. Attendees can ask questions via the question panel right there next to the just above chat, and then throughout either I will pose it to Professor Awuzie in between the seminar or the webinar, or at the end. So you can just type the end now, and I will read it out loud later. The chat function just below questions is reserved for webinar organizers and panelists to communicate with attendees. Unfortunately, the attendees will not be able to chat with each other. However, they are encouraged to ask questions at the question panel. A recording of this presentation will be available on the SAIEE YouTube channel TV, and the recording will also be made available on the SAIEE website. It can be found under the events drop-down menu section, past events and webinars. This page is updated regularly, so please check back as often as you can to see new uploads and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And this webinar is certified with CPT points 0.1. Once we receive the validation, then from EXA, we will send it to everyone who attended. So thank you everyone for attending today. My name is Joesph George. I am the chairperson of the SAIEE Free State Centre. And today's topic is understanding smart cities. Our presenter today is Professor Bankole Awuzie. Professor Bankole Awuzie is an associate professor in the Department of Built Environment, Faculty of Engineering, Built Environment and Information Technology at the Central University of Technology. He is an NRF-rated researcher with research interests spanning the domains of smart, sustainable, circular cities research and practice. He has several research outputs to buttress his research area and served as a project manager for the first provincial 4IR Summit, which was held in November 2019. Gives me great pleasure to have Professor Bankole Awuzie here to present for us, and I hand it over to you, Professor.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Joesph, for the warm introduction. And good afternoon to you all. I'm indeed delighted to be here today to make this presentation to this esteemed audience. And I hope we would have some fun today, actually, in trying to unravel what smart cities actually mean. So I'll take you through my presentation, an outline of my presentation. First of all, I will start with providing an introduction. Why do we need smart cities? What is the essence of smart cities? And we'll also look at the composition of cities. We'll look at cities as consumption and production centers. We'll also look at cities as, we'll also look at the challenges to cities, to urban sustainability in cities. And then we'll move to understanding the concept of smart cities and the objectives. Why are we really interested in smart cities or becoming smart? And from there, we'll move on to chronicling the smart city operations. What are those operations that ensure that a city is smart or becomes smart? And then we unravel the different smart solutions as regards smart waste management systems, smart water management systems. We also look at intelligent buildings. And all those have something to do with the electrical engineering and the engineer. And we'll also look at the challenges to smart city implementation before concluding the session. So I'll start with a video. Unfortunately, this video you might not get the sound out of the video, but I'll just encourage you to wait and see what it is. I will explain it later. So in this instance, we're talking for the video, you could see an engineering solution that we would normally put forward previously. If you have a congestion on the road, traffic congestion on the road, or more vehicles being introduced in an urban area, the most efficient, as I previously, the most efficient approach to managing that congestion or to decongestion the road would be to proceed to provide more lanes. And that's what this video is saying here. Moving in, yeah. Okay, so I'll move into the next slide though. Yeah, so basically from that video, what the narrator is talking about. I know you have some challenges with the audio, but what the narrator is talking about is the fact that previously, if we notice congestion on our roads, the imminent engineering solution would be to add more lanes. And just like nature, which abhors vacuum, what happens? We have more vehicles, more people buying vehicles, and more cars coming onto the road again has expanded. And that leads to further congestion. So if we're talking about smart, if we're talking about the 21st century engineering solutions, it will be about asking ourselves, do we actually need to buy cars? Do we actually need to drive so many vehicles? Do we need to have autonomously driven vehicles or self-driving vehicles? Do we need to look at our transportation system to ensure that some people would use the road at a particular point in time and others will use it later on? So these are things, or do we move towards the Uberization of transportation? So those are things that we would be looking at, and those are things that are synonymous with the smart city context. So here we talk about, we all understand that the contemporary society has been faced with challenges that have resulted in unsustainable consumption patterns. We talk about, most of you might be very conversant with the issue of plastics, wastes being littered everywhere, and utilization of resources in a manner that might not guarantee that future generation would have access to this kind of assets or resources. And that is one of the challenges that we face in contemporary society. And this is because of the fact that issues like rapid urbanization, poor resource efficiency, non-sustainable production, lack of education for sustainable development, these are all challenges that we face. And this is evident in the kind of discussions that we have in academia and in society today. So basically, society's desire to tackle most of these challenges would result in a sustainable society, a sustainable environment that caters to advances in societal well-being, economic empowerment and stability, as well as environmental conservation. You can have a look at this slide. It was taken from one of the pro-sustainability asynchronous online discussion forums that I belong to. Someone was trying to explain the essence of water, of resource management. So he talks about water being vital for survival and for producing food, and it goes down to tell us how much water we spend to produce 1 ton of grain that, when fed to cows, produces only 18 pounds of meat. So today, mankind is using about 160 billion tons more water each year than is being replenished by rain and fed back into water storages. So you see that this makes it very, very imperative that we must have to start managing our resources, water, electricity sources, and all that, in a manner that is efficient and effective. And we go down to the city. We ask ourselves, what is a city? a city is an urban area has been defined by other authors as an urban area with a population density of approximately 1,000 persons per square mile. And it also falls under a specific administrative boundary. For some of us who are system thinkers, we would rather see a city as a system of systems that comprises of various systems that have subsystems. Now you could have your waste system, you could have your administrative system, you could have educational systems or subsystems under the system that is a city. So the city works in a line, or the city's purpose is a function of all the subsystems that occur or are situated within a particular environmental and social context. And it constitutes of a mixture of physical and soft components. Soft components, we're talking about culture, we're talking about behavior that is peculiar to a particular context. By physical, we're talking about the infrastructure, buildings, and all that. I would say a mixture or just a position of these soft and hard components are supportive of societal well-being. I would say recently also, cities have become the key elements of national administration systems. Just like if you look at our sustainable development goals, they are all being implemented. If you look at the that are aligned with it, we have 17 sustainable development goals, and we have 169 aligned or associated tasks. These tasks are being implemented in cities and through the city's administrative system, which is aligned to a national administrative system. So suffice to say that the approach that we take to implement or to revamping our cities would help shape the planet's future appearance. Again, cities have a tendency cities make significant contributions to national development and competitiveness. If you have a city that is unattractive, non-livable, that ranks very low on livability standards, we wouldn't have people moving into those areas to live or to work. And that would lead to a glut and slum, development of slums or emergence of slums in those areas. So efforts are being made to ensure that cities contribute to the attainment of sustainable consumption patterns, okay, within society. That's what will tend to be urban sustainability. In this slide, you can see the evidence where we talk about cities and or regions playing the roles of economic engines. Here you can see the structure of cities. I'll get my laser on. So you can see that when we talk about the structure of the economy, the city has an impact on the structure of the economy. For instance, we talk about the Asian focus on world economy. We talk about flexibility of the labor market. How flexible is the labor market in a particular city, and how does that influence the economy? We talk about what is the disposition of a particular city to start-ups and scale-ups of small businesses. What is the disposition of that city, or a particular city, to growing the number of self-employed persons? What are the kind of business models that are prevalent in those cities? We also look at cities in relation to economies and technology. Here we're talking about those sustainability techniques, big data, robotization, digitalization. How does this help to facilitate societal well-being in a particular city and also impact on the economy of that particular area? So we look at, again, the economy in terms of demography. Okay, we're looking at population growth. We're looking at how are we able to attract more people to the cities, or how are we able to cater to smaller households? How do we cater to our aging population, looking at geriatrics? And again, importance and quality of life. Okay, how do we emphasize quality of life? And the same thing comes up to the social, which I talked about, the soft part. So we're looking at globalization, we're looking at work-life balance, we're looking at healthy living, individualism. So these are basically aspects of how the city is viewed when we talk about the city as an economic engine, or the engine of growth, economic growth. Now we look at what are the challenges to urban sustainability. I mentioned on the previous slide, one of the previous slides, about the need to cater to ensuring urban sustainability, wherein we use resources in a way that allows for future generations to also derive the same benefits or similar benefits from the kind of resources that we're presently using. And here we talk about one of the challenges that we have towards urban sustainability is rapid urbanization. From the graph here, which was sourced from UNDESA, that's the UN Department for Economic and Social. Now you would find out that you would see that there has been a continuous growth in urban population, and there is, now we are in 2020, and it appears that between now and 2020, where we have about 4 billion, nearly 4 billion of our population living in the urban areas, it appears that we would have nearly double of that by 2050. So that will give you the impression of, or give you an insight into how our cities will look in the next 30 years, based on things like due to rapid urbanization and climate change. Again, this is in the African context, according to the Economic Commission for African States under the United Nations. You can see what the projections are for Central Africa, East Africa, North Africa, Southern Africa, and West Africa. And you can see that, for instance, West Africa is projected to double its urban population figures by 2050. So this makes it very, very imperative, and the same applies to Southern Africa. Southern Africa comes next after West Africa. So this makes it imperative that we start thinking about how do we cater for the resources that these people, or people who are moving from the rural areas to the urban area, or rather the increasing population, how would they manage? How would they survive with the basic resources that are available in urban areas? We also look at this energy consumption. We look at the nature of, or the sources of the energy that is being consumed. This is from the primary energy consumption globally, figures relating to that in 2018. Now you can see that coal and oil amount to close to 61% of the overall energy usage, energy consumption. So these are the major sources, and they are not sustainable. They're mostly fossil fuels. So we have to start thinking about renewables. We have to start thinking about how do we hybridize our energy requirements or energy usage supply. Again, you can see what's happening here. The incidence of waste it's something that is becoming has continued to persist in our society, in urban areas today. And you can see the instance of burst pipes, derelict infrastructure, water spillage and leakages are challenges that we have to face, that are facing us today in contemporary society. Again, we have issues about poor transmission networks. So this images are sourced from Google and have been acknowledged at the end. You can see the kind of density we have in urban areas, and you can see the gridlock that we're having here. We move again. This is 2020, the year of the pandemic. You would understand that ensuring urban sustainability has to also affect or support or improve our health and well-being as individuals, and as well as the environmental well-being. You can see from this figure, this diagram that has been sourced from the Center for Disease Control. You can see the impact of various climate change climate-related issues and pollution, how they affect our health and well-being. For example, you can see here that air pollution, which is becoming rampant these days, would lead to asthma and cardiovascular diseases. Changes in vector ecology would lead to, due to more extreme weather, will lead to malaria, dengue, and Rift Valley fever, Lyme disease, and some other West Nile virus as well. And when we talk about the rising sea levels as well, they'll lead us to things like increasing allergens because of the vegetation and all that, and that can lead to respiratory allergies and asthma. So you see that there's a direct correlation between the way we cater to our environment and the impact of that on climate change, and indirect impact on that on our health, and on human health and environmental health as well. This is a diagram from the World Meteorological Organization in 2019. It shows you how changes in climate, the climate change related issues have affected the globe. You see that plus 2 million people have been displaced by weather-related issues, weather and climate change, climate-linked disasters. About 821 million estimated people are currently undernourished. Okay, and then there's also an impact of this on the ecosystem, and also deaths have increased deaths that have been associated with heat waves and all that have also increased in recent times. Also, food production will not be spent. It's been projected there is likely to be a decline if we don't embark or reassess the way we go about food production. This report, which has been cited at the back in the reference list, which you can also access at your convenience, talks about the impact of climate change and urban sustainability, rural-urban migration on the food production and the future of farming. And talks about, it goes on to advocate the introduction of technology. And as I pray we don't get to those points of famine. I think so many of us have seen this happen in some other countries. So we move to understanding the concept of smart cities. And here we say that the smartness of a city describes its ability to bring together all its resources to effectively and seamlessly achieve the goals and purpose and fulfill the purposes it has set for itself. So in this case, if we're looking at trying to resolve most of these challenges, we have to look at what are the resources available. We have to be able to document or to examine and document the amount of resources that we have, and then decide on how to properly utilize these resources so that every person is actually contented or gets to the point of satisfaction. And so that is what we will be looking at. That is what brings about smartness. That's what has led to the smart city agenda, which I always say is interlinked to the quest for sustainability. Because we want to achieve sustainable development, then we'll have to look at how do we leverage on technology and smart people and smart communities to drive effective decision making. And that is towards the use of these resources that are not finite or not infinite. So here we say this involves the effective integration of physical, digital, and human systems in the built environment, more especially to deliver sustainable, prosperous, and inclusive future for its citizens. Again, so this would include the adoption and deployment of innovative solutions, okay, which are not only limited, but are mainly largely based, not solely limited, not limited, but largely based on ICT infrastructure, okay, to improve urban everyday life and enhance local sustainability in terms of people, governance, economy, mobility, transportation, all that, environment, and living standards. So we say that the smart city, being an agglomeration of all these innovative solutions, can serve as a platform for facilitating improved urban sustainability performance. This is the reason why we are pushing for a smart city agenda, why cities are transiting towards becoming smart. And we will proceed further to say that there is no widely accepted definition for the term smart cities. Different authors, different scholars have their own views about what it should connote. So I believe that it has to do with just the governance, how you go, the mode to governance. Others believe that it has to do with cyber physical systems and integration and connectivity. And it's been used interchangeably with different terms, such as network communities, intelligence communities, broadband communities, and all that. But it has also evolved from challenging new network opportunities and steering competitiveness gains. So basically, it's about how do we connect, achieve high levels of connectedness or interconnectedness in communities to drive community development efforts. So how do we do that in a way that is inclusive? And that runs across, like I mentioned before, it runs across these facets of having smart living, smart economy, smart infrastructure, smart transportation, smart environment, smart services, and smart governance, and most especially smart people. So in our literature, we find out that the smart city concept emerged in contemporary literature in 1994 for the first time, according to Anthropoulos. And in 1994, it was basically about the narrative concerning the first digital city practice in Amsterdam. And from there, various researchers started writing about it, got engrossed in it, and it has transformed from being merely a digital city to being a smart city. I think one of the last instances we had was the IEEE Smart City Group that wrote extensively about, in 2015, about what should constitute a smart city and how do you operationalize a smart city or smartness in a city. In all those definitions, 4 common features stand out. First of all, there has to be a viable communication medium that is actually the platform for enabling interconnectedness. And we often refer to this as the network infrastructure technology, ICT technology that is available. We also understand that there has to be smart people to be able to interpret, to be able to produce data, to be able to read data and understand data and apply it in decision making. And we also have to look at the process. The process has to be interconnected. We cannot have a smart city if different units or different systems of the biggest city system are operating in silos. We must have that level of interconnectedness, which is now being enabled by the ICT infrastructure or other kinds of digital technology infrastructures that are available. And again, there has to be a goal. Like I would say, in most contexts, if you're looking at the European context, for example, they might not really be looking at how to use this to drive inclusivity in neighborhoods. But here in South Africa, or in the African context, we would be looking at not further deepening the technology divide or the poverty divide, but rather bringing about high levels of inclusivity. So if we're going to, as a context or as a society, evolve smart cities, we should be able to identify a goal that is peculiar to our situation. We should be able to identify a particular modality or put in place particular modalities for achieving that goal that is peculiar or contextually peculiar to our context, rather than following up with keeping up with the Joneses, because that would further exacerbate the incidence of poverty in our context. And so we'll look at what are the characteristics of a smart city. So we'll say, first of all, the basis, the goals that a smart city pursues are more or less woven around issues like sustainability, quality of life, urbanization. How do we get urbanization that is not harmful to society? And then smartness. How do we leverage on technology to elicit data and to use that data to make decisions? So invariably, we cannot be making decisions without data, without proper information in a smart city context, and that is the essence. And we also look at how do we look around these various items or facets that have been mentioned by Silva et al., which includes infrastructure and governance. How do we ensure that when we're making decisions that have to do with energy and climate change, we're considering sustainability, we're leveraging on smartness, we're also considering the improvement of quality of life, and we're also enabling effective and considerate urbanization. When we're making decisions that have to do with revolve around technical governance, economics, and financial well-being and emotional well-being, we also have to be considerate of issues of sustainability and the quadrants, the 4 factors on the quadrants here. So objectives which a smart city would set out to pursue would normally include convenience of public services. Here we have issues of service delivery, and we expect that if you have efficient data processing arrangements that lets you know how to allocate your resources between different neighborhoods in a particular city, that would help bring about more convenience and bring about more livability amongst the constituents of that particular city. This also talks to the issue of effective city management, because when we talk about effective city management, it's more about resource allocation. How do resources accrue and how are they allocated? And is that allocation informed by data? Is it a heuristic? Is it by rule of the thumb? Do we thumb suck the allocation of resources? So in this way, if we talk about data-driven resource allocation, then that can enable us to have effective city management. Again, we look at the smartness of infrastructure networks. Like the video I showed at the outset, do we go ahead to add more lanes to cater to increasing car ownership, or do we go about bringing in a procedural or behavioral change in the mindset or shift in mindset of the population, whereby we discontinue the issue of the trend or fashion of buying more cars, more vehicles, but rather move into things like carpooling, move into things like autonomously driven vehicles, things like improved public transport systems. Do we have intermodal means of transportation between points, like your BRT and all that, the bus rapid transit systems? Again, we also look at long-term effectiveness of network security. That is one of the objectives. How do you cater to long-term effectiveness of network security? Most people are concerned about the data-driven nature of smart cities. They are scared that their data could go out, personal data could get out into the public domain. And how do we guarantee that security of network to prevent such, to forestall such incidences from happening, or to keep it at the barest minimum? Again, we also look at increased access to governance by citizens. When we have a smart city, people are actually interested. Most people are able to participate, what we call participatory governance. People are able to participate in governance in their clients by communicating, venting out their disdain or their appreciation about things that have happened in their localities. People are able to report incidences, things like burst pipes and all that. People are able to contribute to the running of the system of the cities. So that's what we look at. And then we also talk about support sustainable livelihoods within the urban space, because the digital economy can lead to, it has been shown that digital economy can lead to job creation, can lead to new skills. It can also lead to poverty. It can also lead to deepening the technology divide. So we have to embrace this with care. We have to look at how do we go about meeting this objective whilst also catering to our contextual peculiarities. This is a generic smart city. Like I said, it's about layers, various layers. Here we have, from an engineering perspective, you can have the sensing layer, where we have your Bluetooth, your RFID, your sensor network, which are based on physical devices and infrastructure, buildings, vehicles, appliances. And this is meant to transmit via this transmission layer the data that has been collected, what is happening in that particular locality or in that particular area. How do you collect that? This data is transmitted, is obtained first of all by the sensor network that we have at the sensing layer, and then it's transmitted through via the transmission layer to the relevant portals for data management. So you can see here that you're aggregating data from various sources in data fusion, and then you're analyzing that data. You're processing the data as well, and you're storing it. And this leads you to decision management. I'll give you an example. If for instance, we have a car park in a university, for example, and then you have, this car park has a capacity of 40 vehicles, okay? And if people are coming to work in the morning, the sensors that have been fitted on this car park would notify the vehicle owners who are coming into the car park if of its capacity. Is it full? Is it empty? Are there still parking spaces? And what kind of parking spaces are there? This would enable us also to be able to decipher or to discern how many people actually come into the car park and at what time. With that, you can start making arrangements, so you don't go ahead to start developing a new car park. Because over the time, we've seen when we talk about the static infrastructure, which is non-responsive, you would have a car park that is meant to cater to 40 cars, but on a regular basis cannot meet half of its capacity. So those are things that we would have to look at to create about efficiency in resource utilization. And that is what the data helps you do, to make these decisions about, do we build more or do we stop? Do we use some incentives to make people not to come to university with their vehicles? Do we provide some incentives for those who have more than one vehicle or who don't have a vehicle? Okay, that makes them not, that incentive, would it be commensurate to the amount of money we would have used to start building a new one, or would it be lower? So these are decisions that have to be made, and that they can only be made with the aid of data, effective data analysis and data processing. And these are the layers where these decisions are applied. So for security and surveillance, for healthcare management, for industrial management, weather forecasting, transportation management, grid distribution, community development, and all that. And this is sourced from the World Economic Forum, which looks at the various solutions that you can have in smart cities. So here, it's broken down here by Khalid. So you're looking at e-governance, like I explained before, publicly available information. So there are pathways for grievance redressal. You don't really have to meet an individual to do this. This things can be done remotely in a smart city context. There are opportunities, various pathways for engaging citizens in governance. Okay, and then electronic service delivery. So the citizens become the city's eyes and ears because they're able to report incidences to the city management. If there are challenges that they have, things like broken down infrastructure, the related infrastructure, issues like crime and all that. And again, we look at waste. Okay, what do we do with waste? Most times we send most of these things to the landfill and all that. But with this in this era of smartness, we're able to start looking at how do we leverage on technology or digital platforms to actually drive, okay, the circular economy. How do we move? How do we close the loop, as we would say? So how do you convert waste into a resource? How do we convert wastewater, for example? How do we treat it? How are we going to move with construction and demolition waste? How do we recycle it rather than take it to a landfill? So how much waste are we saving from the landfill? And again, how about water management, the smart meters, leakage identification? How do we identify where pipes have been burst and where there are challenges? How do we understand the quality of the water that we're drinking with these? Then we'll look at energy as well. How do we hybridize various energy sources to make sure that we are leaning more towards renewable energy or green energy than just conventional grid systems? How do we do that in a way that is cost effective for the client and for society? And how do we do that in a way that creates jobs for people as well? I've described the intelligent traffic management system, and I also talked about the smart parking. In this instance, I gave about the university. And there are also things like incubation and trade facilitation centers. These are all facets of smart cities, looking at the solutions. And this is this bears semblance to the previous slide before last, where we're talking about how do you sense. So this is the typologies that we have in a construction environment. So we're looking at diversity, sustainable transportation, solar design for buildings, ecological design in houses, mixed land use, and we're talking about compactness. How do we bring people together so that you don't have to travel long distances to get to a place of work? So doing, you're saving on energy, you're saving on fossil fuel consumption and things like that. We're looking at water management, built environment, buildings. So how these are the domains within the urban area that we have to apply our smartness, our these technologies into driving and facilitating smartness. And this shows you the utility of the Internet of Things in the design of sustainable smart cities. Here we go to the issue of waste. We've tried to do this at the university here at CUT, and we intend to scale it up if successful to the province, whereby you have proximity sensors on the waste bins, and you have weighing scales on the waste bins. This way, they're able to communicate. The waste bins are able to communicate to the waste truck to say, "I'm full, come pick me up," and all that. So we have done this here on campus, installing sensors to sense the methane content, the gas content in the waste bins, as well as the proximity. How far off from the lead is the refuse? And with that, it sends signals to the ground staff who now go to the waste bins to evacuate or to remove the waste that is there. So this way, you see, it reduces your collection costs. It means that there are no missed pickups. There's reduced overflows, like we saw in the initial slides, one of the initial slides where we had lots of litter around the waste skip. But again, it does waste rationalizes. With that, we're able to tell how much waste is being generated, what kind of waste is being generated, and how do we curb the sense of such kind of wastes. For instance, at CUT here, we're trying to use that one of the bins replaced by the cafeteria to look at what kind of, and the hotel school, to look at what kind of food waste is most predominant. And with that, we can advise the food vendors on campus to reduce the inclusion or introduction of such food items in the meals that they prepare. So it helps you to actually analyze and make decisions and informed decisions of that about how to manage the incidence of waste in a particular area. And again, it also would help us to look at carbon with CO2 emission reduction, because then we're looking at how to curb the reduced leaves that you have would also lead to lesser emission of CO2 into the atmosphere from the trucks and pickup trucks and all that. So those are things that we have looked at from the smart waste management system. And it brings us to the incidence of water. We talk about having a smart water management system in a smart city that would help you with collecting data. You see, it's still about data collection, information processing, analysis, and presentation. So it would help you would cascade across those facets, those 7 facets here, which is basically looking at what's the quality of the water at the water source. Then you look at the asset management. What kind of assets do you have for refining the water, for purifying the water, for collecting the water, and for managing it, for storing it? And what is the attendant risk that is associated with different kinds of assets that you have and with the water purification stages? And then look at the advanced water treatment and automation processes. And these are all, and you have leakage detection, which is very, very critical. And then look at the metering system. How are we able to meter to regulate our usage of water and to actually price it accordingly? So this would lead you to secure water resources, so we wouldn't be using water recklessly. And this could also talk about, when you talk about water sources and sensors, we could also go to looking at things like your gray water and black water. How do we bring them back into the system? How do we use them? For what purposes and for what intentions? So safe water supply, resilient water supply. These are the advantages you get from smart water management systems in your urban area. Improved revenue to water ratio, sustainable water supply, reduced operating costs, because then decisions have been taken in a timely manner and it's based on data that has come from the water management system in itself. And then we'll move on to smart intelligent buildings. These are buildings that are able to regulate themselves, to be able to manage their contributions to sustainability, to sustainable development, by actually ensuring that the occupants have the highest level of comfort, or a suitable level of comfort, without actually utilizing or wasting resources. So here you see it's the KPIs for a smart building will be social sensitivity. So you are considering the people who are there, what are their soft sides, their perceptions about this, and what do they need to become more productive, and how do you cater to them? We also look at environmental responsiveness. Then we're talking about the embodied carbon in buildings. We're talking about your HVAC systems. Why are we not using more of natural ventilation? How do you design these buildings to be able to be responsive to the environment without undermining environmental sustainability? We also look at things like the economic and cost efficiency of these buildings. So these are the KPIs that we have. And also look at this level of smartness and technology-driven awareness. So every decision that has been made about the building, an intelligent building, would be one that tries to achieve a combination of these 4 KPIs. With that, it becomes an intelligent building because it's able to innovate, it's able to provide by itself high levels of environmental responsiveness, whilst catering to social sensitivity and all that. And we say here that the literature on intelligent buildings or smart buildings commenced in the early 80s when we talked about integrated technology. How do we integrate technology into building? In the 90s, we moved into advanced technology adoption, ICT adoption and automation. And then in the 2000s, we moved into embedded intelligence, okay, for user interaction. So you can come into your apartment and say it's hot, and then a command goes off and it becomes the HVAC goes on. Okay, so those are things that we, and again, you also look at how does that influence quality of life. And then by 2010, we have gone into building information modeling, where you simulate buildings originally before occupation, before construction, to tell the best, highest levels of sustainability that can be achieved in a particular building design. How does it monitor? Then you leverage on building intelligence to monitor climate resilient policies and all that. And then by 2015, we had these KPIs coming into play. And then in the future, we hope that buildings will live up to their potentials of being intelligent, of being responsive to the user needs, and changing themselves according to changing their modalities or the operations according to the user needs as times evolve. However, just like every other thing, the delivery of smart cities or implementation of smart cities has not been seamless, has not really gone without challenges. And here we're saying that most of the challenges that we have that have bedeviled the implementation of smart city, particularly in our context, has been things like cost of operation. There is this perception that it is going to very, very expensive to install sensors, to train people, to make people become aware and smart, digitally literate, to manage or to function in a smart city. So those are the cost of operation, things like systems failure. I talked about information security, where people are not really sure about where their data is going to and how it's being managed and how it's being secured. Waste management is another issue because particularly here in South Africa, and in the rest of Africa and in Mexico as well, where there's a challenge, people don't really subscribe to smart waste management. People believe that it should be done by those because the means of employment for various people in our society, that it should be left for those for scavengers to actually separate waste and to manage the process of the waste value chain. Actually, again, there are also challenges towards management of big data. With a city, if you look at the size of the city and the different subsystems that are embedded in the city, we would appreciate the level of heterogeneity of data that is coming out from different subsystems. And we need to have the expertise, the skills, the resources to be able to manage this data using big data analytics and all that. And this is a big challenge. And again, sustainability is another challenge. Our perceptions of sustainability differ. So in trying to achieve sustainability or sustainable development, different stakeholders would usually have different perceptions and mindsets. And that would affect how we trade off, decide on the trade-offs. Do we go more for economic sustainability or for social sustainability or for environmental sustainability? Which one do we give a higher rating and which one do we deploy more resources to? So those are the challenges that we would have that are going to bedevil smart city implementation. Again, the availability of the right skill sets and issues concerning trade and employment policies remain core challenges. To conclude, I dare say that cities remain central to national economic development and competitiveness. They also serve as platforms for achieving sustainable development goals through and thereby enhancing societal well-being and livability for the populace. However, till the present day, cities have been theaters of where mismanagement of resources have reigned supreme. And this has led to unsustainable consumption patterns and undermined society's quest for sustainability and sustainable development. The smart city concept remains a probable panacea. It doesn't solve all the problems, but it can contribute significantly to resolving most of these problems that are associated with unsustainable consumption patterns in cities, thereby allowing us and our generation to be kind to future generations and generations yet unborn in the manner that we use our resources. Thank you. The references that we used are here for your consultation if you want to. Thanks. Over to you.
Thank you, Professor Awuzie. Thank you. That was actually really interesting. It actually just shows how much of like how many areas in life your smart cities can be involved in. So thank you very much for that. We have a question here from Anthony Roft. Did you change the mindset of the population and take ownership of their city? Professor Awuzie, can you hear me?
I heard you. So he's asking if it's possible for us to change the mindset of the populace.
And to take ownership of the city. How do you change the mindset of the population and take ownership of the city?
Well, I think just like everything in life, I think it has been done, not particularly about changing, not about taking ownership, because you can't really take ownership of a city because the city is populated by people who have different ideas and different perceptions, and who want to have a sense of inclusion, a sense of belonging in the city. So I think more or less what we need to do is to be able to show the constituents of a particular city the advantages of transiting towards the smart city, we have to also show them, first of all, first-hand basis. For some of us, we don't believe in full-scale smart city transition. We believe that you should start with a smart city transition, one neighborhood after another. So in that way, people are able to see, there's a saying that seeing is believing, and people are able to see the benefits that people who are residing in neighborhood A or district A are benefiting from this transition, because there it's becoming, people are not losing jobs, rather people are getting jobs. People are getting more in tune to technology. People are able to connect with others seamlessly without stress. So people are able to spend less on electricity consumption in their houses or water consumption in their houses. So when people start seeing that, it has to be evidence driven. So for you to convince people and convert people, just like we're doing at the university here, you must back it up with evidence. You must have to show, experiment, and show the results to people. Okay, and that is what can make them start buying into the agenda. Otherwise, it will remain a pipe dream.
Okay, thank you. Stephen from SMEC Consulting asks, has the speaker seen any positive examples of how certain municipal utilities, in particular electrical power utilities, have implemented in the journey to smart cities, which have been which can be held up for others in South Africa?
Sorry, could you? I didn't get all that. I didn't get the whole question. Could you just repeat it?
So, Stephen is asking, has there been any positive examples of how municipal utilities, especially electrical power utilities, have implemented, I think, the smart cities, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. At this point, there are no case studies of excellence, particularly within the South African context, as regards municipal or power distribution, generation distribution entities in South Africa. However, I understand that in the city of Gauteng, a colleague of mine, Samson, carried out a study on behalf of Eskom to look at the potential to compute the maximum level of solar energy that can be generated from the rooftops, an aggregation of the rooftops in Johannesburg, in the city of Johannesburg. Now, this is one of the ways of, this is part of the data that we're talking about for smart cities. If you're armed with that kind of information, then you can start looking at how do we hybridize between the grid and off-grid platforms. How do we hybridize between the fossil fuel-driven energy and renewable energy from the solar? So those are aspects that I know that entities can go towards. But at this point, I think that it has to start from not just about generation and hybridization of electricity sources, but it also has to do with educating the consumers. It also has to do with informing them about the kind of equipment to install in houses, the kind of energy ratings for particular equipment, for particular equipment installations and houses that will lead to reduced energy consumption, and that also benefits the grid. Okay, I don't think I've answered your question.
Yeah, I think you're talking more about like the smart meters as well.
Yes. Yes. Basically.
Consumption and seeing it live, and then try and base your consumption based on what you're consuming.
Yes.
Guys, do we have any other questions for Professor Awuzie? I see there's a hand up here. Ntashama Lupangu.
Okay.
I put you on mute. Do you have something to say? Oh, I guess not. Okay. I think that's all. Thank you so much, Professor Awuzie. Thank you for taking the time to present to us today. I will send Professor Awuzie's email as well to everyone in case someone has some follow-up question. Thank you, and thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us, guys. I also would like to thank Minx for helping us with this webinar. And thank you to everyone here who attended. And if you want to see the webinar, it will be on SAIEE TV in the next day or so. Great.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. It's nice to be here. Thank you.
No, thank you. Great. Thank you, Minx. I think we're done.